I still remember the first time I saw Victoria Hayes. I was standing near the back wall of a crowded charity event in Manhattan, holding a cheap glass of champagne and pretending I belonged there. Everyone around me wore designer suits, expensive watches, and smiles that looked fake enough to crack under pressure. I had only attended because my architecture firm needed investors. A waiter walked past me and muttered, "You're blocking the hallway, sir." Before I could move, a woman's voice stopped him. "He's fine where he is." I turned and saw Victoria. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent back then, but it wasn't the dress that caught me. It was her eyes. Calm, sharp, curious. The waiter immediately apologized. "Sorry, Miss Hayes." Victoria looked at me. "Ignore him." I laughed nervously. "I'm used to it. People ignoring you. People reminding me I don't belong." She smiled slightly. "And do you?" "No," I admitted. "But the food is free, so I'm surviving." That made her laugh. For the next hour, she stayed beside me while everyone else in the room fought for her attention. Rich men interrupted us constantly. "Victoria, your father's looking for you." "Victoria, investors from London just arrived." "Victoria, can we discuss the merger?" Every single time, she answered the same way. Later, at one point, I finally asked, "Why are you talking to me?" "Because you're the only honest person here. You don't even know me." "I know enough." That night changed my life. 3 months later, we were secretly dating. 6 months later, her father found out. Richard Hayes invited me to dinner inside his massive penthouse overlooking Central Park. I had never seen a dining table so long in my life. It felt less like a home and more like a courtroom. Richard stared at me while cutting his steak. "So," he said coldly, "you design office buildings." "I'm an architect." "You're a man with student loans and a rented apartment." Victoria immediately spoke. "Dad." "No, let him answer." Richard leaned back. "Tell me, Ethan, what exactly makes you think you belong with my daughter?" I tried staying calm. "I love her." Richard laughed directly in my face. "Love?" he repeated. "That's the answer poor men give when they have nothing else." Victoria slammed her fork onto the table. "That's enough." Richard ignored her. "You think marriage changes class? It doesn't. Men like you survive by attaching yourselves to powerful women." I never asked Victoria for money. "You won't have to. Eventually, she'll hand it to you willingly." Victoria grabbed my hand under the table. "I'm marrying him," she said firmly. Richard's eyes hardened. "If you do, don't expect this family to support your mistake." Victoria looked at me instead of him. "I don't care." After dinner, I told her, "You shouldn't fight your family because of me." She touched my face gently. "You are my family. But your father hates me. My father hates losing control. You're risking everything." She kissed me before I could say anything else. "I choose you," she whispered. A year later, she became my wife. When we moved into our penthouse downtown, I honestly believed life had finally rewarded me for years of struggle. Every morning, I woke up beside the woman I loved. Sometimes I would stand near the giant windows overlooking the city and wonder how someone like me ended up there. Victoria used to laugh whenever I said that. One night, while we were sitting on the balcony together, I told her, "I still feel like this could disappear tomorrow." She rested her head against my shoulder. "It won't. Your world is different from mine. Our worlds are the same now. Your father disagrees. My father doesn't decide my life. You make it sound easy. It is easy." She looked directly into my eyes. "Money and status will never come between us. Never." I wanted to believe her. Sometimes she would pull me onto the dance floor in our living room while jazz music played from hidden speakers. She would smile, wrap her arms around my neck, and whisper, "See, this is all that matters." In those moments, I believed love could protect us from everything outside our door. I didn't realize secrets were growing between us like cracks beneath glass. For a while I did. Then things started changing. It began with small moments. Quiet moments. Victoria started taking phone calls in other rooms. She stopped leaving her phone near me. Some nights, I woke up and realized her side of the bed was empty. Whenever I asked where she had gone, she always answered quickly, "Work. You left at 2 in the morning." I had to handle something important. What kind of work happens at 2 in the morning? The kind I can't ignore. The distance between us grew slowly enough to make me question my own instincts. Then Richard invited us to dinner again. The tension started before the food even arrived. Richard sipped his wine and stared at me. "Tell me, Ethan, are you enjoying the billionaire lifestyle?" Victoria sighed. "Dad, please." "No, I'm curious." He smiled without warmth. "Men like Ethan usually dream about this kind of life." I kept my voice calm. "I had dreams before I met Victoria, and yet your life improved dramatically afterward." Victoria looked angry now. "Why do you keep insulting my husband?" "Because reality insults him already." I clenched my jaw. Richard leaned closer. "People like you never survive in our world, Ethan. Eventually, the pressure crushes you." Victoria stood up immediately. "We're leaving." The ride home felt painfully quiet. That night, I woke up around 3 in the morning and noticed Victoria missing again. I walked down the hallway toward the living room. Before entering, I heard her crying softly. Then her voice broke through the silence. "He can never find out the truth." After hearing Victoria cry that night, I stopped sleeping properly. Every time her phone buzzed, my chest tightened. Every late-night drive felt suspicious. Every soft smile she gave me looked forced now, like she was hiding behind it instead of living inside it. 3 days passed before I finally confronted her. We were standing in the kitchen in the morning while coffee brewed beside us. "Who were you talking to that night?" I asked quietly. Victoria froze for half a second. "What?" "I heard you crying." She looked away immediately. "It was work stress." "That's not what you said." "Ethan, you said someone could never find out the truth." Her voice became colder. "You shouldn't listen to private conversations." I stared at her in disbelief. "That's your answer? What do you want me to say?" "I want my wife to stop acting like I'm a stranger." Silence filled the room. Finally, she whispered, "Some things are complicated." "Then explain them to me." "I can't." That answer stayed inside my head for days. The warmth between us disappeared after that conversation. Victoria stopped touching me first. We barely ate dinner together anymore. Even when we sat beside each other, it felt like a wall existed between us. One afternoon, my younger sister Lily showed up at my office unexpectedly. The second she saw my face, she frowned. "You look terrible." "Thanks. I'm serious." She sat across from me. "What's happening?" "Nothing." "Ethan." I sighed heavily. "Victoria's hiding something." Lily stayed quiet for a moment. "Do you think she's cheating?" "I don't know." "That's not an answer." I said I don't know. She leaned forward. "Then stop torturing yourself and confront her properly." "I already tried." "No, you ask questions." "That's different." "What am I supposed to do? Demand answers?" "Yes." I rubbed my forehead. "I love her, Lily, and you're losing yourself because of it." Her words hit harder than I expected. Before leaving, she grabbed my hand gently. "Whatever the truth is," she said softly, "don't let it destroy who you are." 2 nights later, Victoria invited me to another Hayes charity gala. The ballroom was packed with politicians, celebrities, and investors pretending to care about sick children, while photographers chased them across the room. Victoria stood beside me, wearing a silver dress that made every person in the room stare at her. Normally, she would hold my arm during events like this. That night, she barely touched me. Then Richard Hayes approached us with a glass of champagne. "Well," he said smoothly, "you two certainly look happy." Victoria's jaw tightened. "What do you want, Dad?" "I'm speaking to my son-in-law." "I'd rather you didn't." Richard ignored her completely. "Marriage becomes difficult when people come from different worlds." I forced a smile. "You've mentioned that before." "Because it remains true." Victoria stepped closer to me. "Stop embarrassing yourself." Richard smirked. "I'm not the embarrassed one." Before she could answer, another man walked toward us. Tall, expensive suit, calm smile. The moment Victoria saw him, her entire body stiffened. "Victoria," he said softly. She looked pale. "Mason." Richard immediately smiled wider. Perfect timing. The man turned toward me and offered his hand. "Mason Blake." I shook it carefully. "Ethan Cole. I've heard a lot about you." Something about his voice bothered me instantly. Victoria crossed her arms. "What are you doing here?" "Your father invited me." "Of course he did." Mason looked at me again. Victoria used to talk about New York constantly when we were younger. You knew each other well? I asked. Before he answered, Victoria cut in sharply. We grew up around the same people. Mason smiled slowly. That's one way to describe it. The tension between them felt impossible to ignore. Richard suddenly said, Mason just returned from London. He's doing incredible business overseas. That's nice, Victoria replied coldly. Mason kept watching her. You disappeared from my life very suddenly. Victoria's voice hardened. Not here. I looked between them carefully. Am I missing something? No, Victoria answered immediately. Mason chuckled under his breath. Not yet. The rest of the gala felt unbearable. Victoria avoided Mason the entire night, but I caught Richard speaking privately with him several times. Every instinct inside me screamed that something was wrong. When we finally returned home, Victoria rushed into the shower without saying much. I sat alone in our bedroom, replaying the evening repeatedly inside my head. Then I noticed something unusual. One of Victoria's desk drawers was slightly open. Normally, she kept every drawer locked. Slowly, I pulled it open farther. Inside was a small stack of old photographs. My stomach dropped instantly. Victoria stood beside Mason in almost every picture, laughing, traveling, holding hands. In one photo, he was kissing her cheek while she smiled directly into the camera. I heard the bathroom door open and quickly shoved the photos back. Later that night, I called my best friend Daniel. I need a favor, I told him quietly. What kind of favor? I need information about someone named Mason Blake. Daniel became silent. Why? Because my marriage suddenly feels like a lie. The next evening, Daniel arrived at my office carrying a folder. You're not going to like this, he warned. My chest tightened. Just tell me. He opened the folder carefully. I found financial transfers connected to Victoria. What kind of transfers? Millions of dollars. I felt sick already. Daniel looked directly at me. The account receiving the money is connected to Mason Blake. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe properly. You're sure? Yes. I stared at the papers with shaking hands. That night, Victoria found me sitting alone in the dark living room. She slowly sat beside me. We need to talk. I looked directly into her eyes. Who is Mason Blake? Pain flashed across her face immediately. Then she whispered the words that shattered my peace. If I tell you the truth, you'll hate me forever. Victoria sat beside me in complete silence while the city lights flickered outside our penthouse windows. I kept staring at her. Talk, I finally said. Her hands trembled slightly. Please don't hate me before I explain everything. That depends on what you say next. She closed her eyes for a moment. Mason and I were together years ago. I already figured that out. It was serious. My chest tightened painfully. How serious? Victoria looked down at the floor. I got pregnant. The world around me suddenly felt distant. What? Her voice cracked. I was 23. My father found out before anyone else did. I stood up immediately. No, Ethan. No, I backed away from her. Tell me you're lying. Tears filled her eyes. I can't. I pressed both hands against my face, trying to breathe. You had a child? Yes. The word shattered something inside me. For several seconds, I couldn't even look at her. Finally, I forced myself to ask, where's the child now? Victoria wiped her tears quickly. Overseas. What does that mean? My father arranged everything after the pregnancy became public inside the family. I stared at her in disbelief. Public? He said the scandal would destroy the company. So he hid the baby? Yes. And you agreed to this? I didn't have a choice. Her voice echoed through the apartment. Victoria started crying harder now. My father threatened me constantly, she whispered. He said the child would grow up hated. He said the press would ruin his life before he could even speak. I laughed bitterly. And you believed him? I was terrified. You abandoned your own child. I never abandoned him. I froze. Him? Victoria nodded slowly. A boy. My stomach twisted. For years, I thought I knew every important part of my wife's life. Suddenly, I realized there was an entire world hidden behind her smile. When were you planning to tell me? I asked quietly. I wanted to, but Mason came back. Anger immediately returned to my chest. What does that have to do with anything? He started threatening me. With what? He said he would expose everything publicly. I stared at her coldly. That's why you transferred money to him? Yes. How much? Millions. I laughed again, but this time it sounded broken even to me. You gave your ex-boyfriend millions of dollars behind my back. I was protecting us. You were lying to me. I didn't know what else to do. I walked toward the balcony windows, trying not to lose control. Behind me, Victoria whispered, I never stopped loving you. Those words only made the pain worse. You loved me. I turned toward her sharply. You built our entire marriage on secrets. I wanted a normal life with you. A normal life? My voice rose. There's a hidden child, blackmail, and secret payments involved. I was scared. You should have trusted me. I know. No, I snapped. You trusted everyone except me. Victoria cried quietly while I stood there shaking with anger. Then another thought hit me. Richard knew. Yes. Mason knew. Yes. How many people knew the truth before me? She stayed silent. That silence answered everything. I felt humiliated, like the entire world had been laughing behind my back while I played the role of the perfect husband. I grabbed my coat immediately. Victoria panicked. Where are you going? To find Mason. Ethan, don't. But I was already walking toward the elevator. Mason was sitting alone inside a private lounge at a hotel downtown when I found him. The second he saw me, he smirked. Well, he said calmly, I wonder how long this would take. I walked directly toward him. You think this is funny? No. Predictable, maybe. I slammed both hands onto the table. You blackmail my wife. Mason slowly sipped his drink. Your wife and I have a complicated history. She paid you millions. She owed me. I grabbed his shirt instantly. She owed you nothing. Mason barely reacted. Careful, Ethan. People are watching. I don't care. He leaned closer to me. You should. My fist tightened harder. Then he smiled directly into my face. Did Victoria tell you everything? She told me enough. I doubt that. Rage burned through my chest. You ruined my marriage. Mason laughed quietly. Your marriage was broken before I returned. You're lying. Am I? He pushed my hands away and fixed his collar calmly. You really thought a woman like Victoria Hayes would stay emotionally satisfied with a struggling architect forever? I punched him before I could stop myself. The force knocked him sideways against the table. People nearby gasped loudly. Mason touched his bleeding lip and smiled again. There he is. I wanted to hit him again. Instead, I forced myself backward. Mason stood slowly. You know the saddest part? I said nothing. You were never supposed to last. My chest tightened. He stepped closer. You were a temporary distraction. Something exciting while she tried escaping her real life. Every word felt like a knife sliding deeper into my chest. You're wrong, I whispered. Then why is she still cleaning up my mess instead of protecting you? I couldn't answer, because part of me suddenly feared he was right. When I returned home hours later, Victoria ran toward me immediately. Where were you? I pulled away when she tried touching me. Did you love him more than me? Her face broke instantly. No, but you hid him from me. I hid the pain. You hid your entire life. Victoria grabbed my arm desperately. Please don't leave. I removed my wedding ring slowly. The sight of it nearly destroyed me. I gave you everything, I whispered. You still have me. No, I said painfully. I never really did. She started sobbing harder. I placed the ring inside my pocket instead of leaving it behind. Then I walked out of the penthouse, carrying nothing else. 3 hours later, I sat alone inside a cheap motel beside the highway. The room smelled like cigarettes and old carpet. I stared at the wedding ring in my hand, while silence filled the darkness around me. For the first time since meeting Victoria Hayes, I finally understood the truth. My entire life had been built on lies. The motel became my entire world for almost 2 weeks. I stopped answering calls. I ignored emails from clients. I barely slept more than 3 hours every night. Most mornings, I just stared at the ceiling wondering how my life had collapsed so fast. Victoria called constantly. I never answered once. Sometimes she left voicemails. Please talk to me. I know you hate me. I'm sorry. Hearing her cry used to destroy me. Now it only made me feel empty. One afternoon, Daniel showed up at the motel unexpectedly. The second he walked inside, He looked disgusted. You're living here? I'm surviving here. This place smells like depression. I shrugged. Feels appropriate. Daniel sat across from me. You look terrible. Everybody keeps saying that. Because it's true. I rubbed my tired eyes. What do you want? To make sure you're still functioning like a human being. I'm breathing. That counts. No, Ethan. It doesn't. I stayed quiet. Daniel lowered his voice. You can hate Victoria without destroying yourself, too. I don't even know what I feel anymore. That's normal. No, I laughed bitterly. Normal is believing your wife actually trusted you. Daniel leaned back carefully. I've been digging deeper into Mason. That got my attention immediately. And there's something wrong with him. Besides blackmail, I'm serious. Daniel opened a folder filled with papers. I found connections between Mason and several shell companies overseas. What kind of companies? Money laundering, fraud, political bribes. I frowned. Victoria's involved? I don't know yet. That answer terrified me more than certainty would have. 2 days later, Lily arrived at the motel carrying coffee and a bag of clothes. The second she entered, she looked heartbroken. Oh, Ethan, I'm fine. You're living in a nightmare hotel eating vending machine food. I said I'm fine. She crossed her arms. Pack your things. What? You're coming home with me. I'm not a child. No, Lily replied softly. You're my brother. I looked away. I can't keep watching you disappear. Something inside me cracked after hearing that. An hour later, I followed her to her apartment in Brooklyn. Her place was small, warm, and painfully normal. No penthouse views. No marble floors. Just quiet music, old furniture, and real life. That first night, Lily made pasta while I sat silently at the kitchen table. Finally, she asked, Do you still love her? I stared down at my plate. I don't know. You do. Maybe I hate that I do. Lily sighed. Victoria hurt you, but your value was never connected to her family. It feels like it was. No, she pointed at me. You built your career before them. You survived before them. Don't let Richard Hayes convince you that your life only mattered because they touched it. I wanted to believe her. But heartbreak makes even simple truths feel impossible. The following week became one of the darkest periods of my life. I stopped showing up to meetings completely. One client finally called, screaming through the phone. Do you understand how much money you're costing us? I'll send the revised plans tonight. You said that 3 days ago. I know. You need to get yourself together. After hanging up, I smashed my phone against the wall. Lily rushed into the room immediately. What happened? I'm tired. You need help. I need my life back. She sat beside me quietly. Then start rebuilding it. A few days later, Daniel introduced me to someone new. We met inside a quiet coffee shop downtown. This is Amelia Grant, Daniel said. The woman across from me looked calm, sharp, and observant. She extended her hand. I'm a journalist. That already sounds dangerous. A small smile appeared on her face. Probably. I crossed my arms. Why am I here? Amelia opened a notebook slowly. I'm investigating Richard Hayes. I don't care. You should. I left that family behind. Unfortunately, she replied, they may not be finished with you. I stood immediately. Wrong answer. Before I could leave, Amelia spoke again. Mason Blake has been under investigation before. That stopped me. I sat back down slowly. What investigation? Financial crimes. Extortion. Bribery. I stared at her carefully. How do you know this? Because I've spent 2 years tracking Richard Hayes and everyone connected to him. Daniel added quietly, she's legitimate. Amelia slid several papers across the table. These are transaction records tied to Mason. I studied them silently. Then I looked up. Why are you showing me this? Because Victoria's name appears beside his repeatedly. Pain hit my chest instantly. I don't want revenge, I muttered. This isn't about revenge. Then what is it about? Amelia's expression darkened. Powerful people destroying lives. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, I asked, what do you think Victoria did? Amelia hesitated slightly. Honestly, yes. I think she spent years trapped between fear and loyalty. I frowned. You barely know her. I know her father. Something about the way she said that stayed with me. Over the next month, my life slowly began changing. I returned to work part-time. I forced myself back into architecture projects. I started jogging in the mornings with Lily yelling encouragement from her apartment window like an annoying coach. Some days still felt unbearable, but other days hurt slightly less. One evening, Amelia met me after work. "You look healthier," she said. "Don't sound so surprised. I wasn't sure you'd survive emotionally." Honestly, neither was I. We sat together quietly for a moment before she handed me another folder. "What's this?" "Proof." I opened it carefully. Inside were legal documents, old settlements, and private reports connected to Richard Hayes. My stomach tightened while reading. Destroyed careers, threats, blackmail, silent scandals, ruined families. Then I saw Victoria's name. "What is this?" I whispered. Amelia looked directly at me. "This," she said softly, "is what happens when someone spends their entire life controlled by a man like Richard Hayes." The collapse started on a Tuesday morning. I was drinking coffee inside Lily's apartment when Amelia called me. "Turn on the television," she said immediately. "What happened?" My article was published. I grabbed the remote and switched to a business news channel. Richard Hayes's face filled the screen beside massive headlines. "Hayes Global under investigation. Financial fraud allegations explode. Mason Blake linked to illegal transfers." Reporters crowded outside Hayes Global headquarters while investors shouted questions into cameras. Lily walked into the living room, holding toast. "What's going on?" I pointed silently at the television. Richard appeared outside the building, surrounded by security. "These accusations are false," he snapped at reporters. "This is a coordinated attack against my company." Then another clip appeared. Mason leaving a courthouse, ignoring questions, looking nervous for the first time since I met him. Lily slowly sat beside me. Wow! I couldn't stop staring at the screen. Part of me felt satisfied. Another part just felt exhausted. An hour later, Daniel arrived, carrying more documents. "It's getting worse," he said. "How bad?" "Federal investigators officially opened financial inquiries this morning." Lily whistled softly. "That's serious." Daniel nodded. "Investors are panicking. Some board members are already resigning." I leaned back against the couch quietly. Months ago, I would have celebrated watching Richard Hayes lose control. Now the entire situation just felt tragic. That evening, Amelia met me outside my office building. "You've been avoiding my calls," she said. "I've been trying to avoid this entire mess." She handed me another file. "You should still read this." I frowned. More corruption? Something different. Inside the folder were legal drafts connected to Hayes' global business partnerships. I scanned the pages quickly before freezing. My name appeared repeatedly. "What is this?" Amelia crossed her arms. "Business agreements Mason tried pushing through the company." I kept reading carefully. Then I noticed something strange. My name had been removed from every finalized contract. I looked up slowly. Why would Victoria remove me? Because she knew those deals were dangerous. I frowned harder. "You're sure?" "She personally blocked your involvement multiple times." The anger inside me weakened slightly. She never told me. She probably thought silence was protection. I laughed bitterly. That strategy worked wonderfully. Amelia studied me quietly. "You still love her. That's not the problem." "What is the problem?" I stared down at the papers. "I don't know who she really is anymore." Amelia's voice softened. "Maybe she doesn't either." That night, Victoria called again. I watched her name appear across my phone screen while my chest tightened painfully. Lily noticed immediately. "You should answer." "I can't." "You mean you won't?" "There's a difference. She's still your wife." "Not emotionally." Lily sighed. "Ethan, people can hurt you and still love you." I looked away. "That doesn't fix anything." Victoria called 3 more times before finally stopping. The silence afterward somehow felt worse. 2 days later, I received an unexpected phone call from an unknown number. "This is Ethan." A calm, older woman answered. "My name is Eleanor Hayes." I immediately straightened. "Hayes?" Victoria's aunt. Suspicion filled me instantly. "Why are you calling me?" "Because someone needs to tell you the truth before your anger destroys everything." I almost hung up. Instead, I asked, "What truth?" "Meet me." 3 hours later, I sat across from Eleanor inside a quiet restaurant uptown. Unlike Richard, she carried none of the Hayes arrogance. She looked tired more than powerful. Eleanor stirred her tea slowly before speaking. You love Victoria very much. I thought I did. She loved you too. I clenched my jaw. Love built on lies doesn't feel real. She was trying to survive. That doesn't excuse what she did. No, Eleanor admitted softly. But you deserve to understand it. I stayed silent. Eleanor looked directly into my eyes. Victoria never wanted to give up her child. Pain in my chest instantly. Then why did she? Richard threatened her. I frowned. Threatened how? He told her the boy would grow up destroyed by scandal. He promised custody battles, media humiliation, and financial ruin. I looked away bitterly. Richard controls everyone. Yes, Eleanor whispered, especially his children. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Then I quietly asked, did she ever see the child again? Eleanor nodded slowly. Many times. I looked back at her sharply. She secretly supported him financially for years. Eleanor continued. School tuition, medical care, everything. Victoria told me the child lived overseas. He does. And she just watched from a distance? She believed it was the only way to keep him safe. I rubbed my face slowly, overwhelmed again. Every new truth made my emotions more confusing. I still felt betrayed. But now I also saw the fear behind Victoria's choices. Eleanor reached into her purse carefully. She asked me to give you this. I stared at the envelope in her hand. My heart immediately started racing. She wrote it herself, Eleanor said softly. I took the letter without speaking. Later that night, I sat alone inside Lily's apartment reading Victoria's handwriting carefully. Every sentence felt painfully honest. She described years of fear, years of manipulation, years of trying to protect everyone around her while slowly destroying herself in the process. By the time I reached the final line, my hand was shaking. I destroyed our marriage, trying to protect everyone except myself. Everything collapsed faster than anyone expected. Within days, federal investigators froze several Hayes global accounts. News helicopters circled company buildings constantly, while reporters treated Richard Hayes like a hunted criminal. Every channel carried the same story. Corruption, fraud, bribery, money laundering. And right beside Richard's name stood Mason Blake. I was sitting inside my office when Daniel burst through the door holding his phone. They're trying to arrest Mason. I stood immediately. What happened? He tried leaving the country last night. Did they catch him? Not yet. I grabbed my jacket instantly. Where's Victoria? Daniel hesitated. Public hearing downtown. My stomach tightened. For what? She's testifying. The hearing room looked like chaos when I arrived. Reporters shouted questions across the hallway, while cameras flashed nonstop. I stayed near the back wall, hoping nobody recognized me. Then Victoria entered. My chest immediately tightened. She looked exhausted, pale, fragile, nothing like the confident woman I married years earlier. Richard Hayes walked beside her angrily. You will say exactly what our lawyers discussed, he snapped quietly. Victoria stopped walking. For the first time since I met her, she looked directly at her father without fear. No. Richard stared at her in disbelief. Excuse me. I'm done protecting you. His expression darkened instantly. You ungrateful little girl. Victoria's voice shook slightly. You controlled my entire life. I built your life. You destroyed it. People nearby immediately started whispering. Richard stepped closer. Think carefully before embarrassing this family further. Victoria laughed bitterly. There's nothing left to protect. Security pulled the doors open moments later. The hearing began. For nearly an hour, lawyers questioned company executives while reporters typed frantically around the room. Then Victoria took the stand. I held my breath, watching her sit beneath the bright lights. A government attorney asked calmly, "Did you knowingly authorize financial transfers connected to Mason Blake?" Victoria closed her eyes briefly before answering. Yes. The room exploded with whispers. Why? Because he threatened me. What kind of threats? He promised to expose private family matters publicly. The attorney continued carefully. Did Richard Hayes know about these payments? Victoria looked toward her father. Richard glared at her coldly. Yes, she whispered. The attorney leaned forward. Did your father pressure you into hiding information over the years? Victoria's eyes filled with tears instantly. Yes. Richard suddenly stood up shouting, "This is ridiculous." The judge slammed his gavel loudly. "Sit down immediately." But Richard kept yelling. "She's emotional. She doesn't understand the consequences of what she's saying." Victoria finally broke completely. "No," she cried. "I understand them perfectly." The entire room became silent. For the next several minutes, she confessed everything. The pregnancy, the threats, the manipulation, the blackmail. Every painful truth spilled out through tears while cameras captured every second. I watched her shaking hands and realized something heartbreaking. Victoria hadn't become cruel. She had become trapped. That realization didn't erase my pain, but changed it. After the hearing ended, Daniel approached me quietly. "Mason contacted investigators." I frowned. "What?" He tried blaming Victoria for everything. Of course he did. Daniel checked his phone again. "Doesn't matter anymore." "What happened?" "They arrested him 30 minutes ago." For the first time in months, I felt absolutely nothing hearing Mason's name. No rage, no satisfaction, just emptiness. Later that evening, Eleanor called me unexpectedly. "There's someone who wants to meet you." I already knew who she meant. My chest tightened instantly. "Where?" 2 hours later, I stood outside a quiet house in Connecticut. My hand shook while Eleanor opened the door. "He's nervous," she warned gently. "I am too." She led me into the living room. A small boy sat near the window, reading quietly. Dark hair, calm eyes. The moment he looked up at me, something inside my chest shifted painfully. "Noah," Eleanor said softly. "This is Ethan." The boy stood slowly. "Hi." His voice sounded small and careful. I forced a smile. "Hi." For several awkward seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Noah quietly asked, "Are you the man my mom married?" The question nearly destroyed me. "Yes." He looked down at the floor. Did I ruin everything? My heart broke instantly. "No," I said quickly. "None of this was your fault." Noah nodded silently. I sat beside him carefully. "Do you like drawing?" His face brightened slightly. "Yeah." He showed me sketches of buildings and bridges from his notebook. For almost an hour, we talked quietly about architecture, cities, and superhero movies. And slowly, I stopped seeing him as part of Victoria's betrayal. He was just a child, an innocent child trapped inside adult mistakes. When I finally left the house, Eleanor walked me to the door. "He likes you," she said softly. I stared out into the dark street. I didn't expect this to hurt differently. Healing usually does. The following morning, every major news channel carried footage of Richard Hayes leaving federal court surrounded by cameras. His company's stock collapsed entirely by afternoon. Board members resigned. Political allies disappeared. Sponsors abandoned him publicly. The untouchable billionaire finally looked powerless. That night, heavy rain covered the city. I sat alone inside Lily's apartment, listening to thunder outside, when someone knocked softly at the door. I opened it slowly. Victoria stood there completely soaked from the rain. Her makeup was gone. Her eyes looked exhausted, broken. For several seconds, we simply stared at each other silently. Then she whispered through trembling tears, "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I still love you." I stared at Victoria, standing in the rain, while my heart fought against itself. Part of me wanted to close the door. Another part still remembered dancing with her in our penthouse kitchen at midnight while jazz music played softly around us. Finally, I stepped aside silently. Victoria entered slowly. Lily appeared from the hallway, saw Victoria, and quietly disappeared into her bedroom without saying anything. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Victoria whispered, "Thank you." I crossed my arms carefully. "Why are you here?" "Because I'm tired of hiding." "You should have felt that way years ago." Pain flashed across her face immediately. "I know." Rain hit the windows softly while silence filled the apartment again. Finally, Victoria looked at me carefully. "You look different." "I am different. That's my fault." I laughed quietly without humor. "Yes, it is." She lowered her eyes. For the first time since our marriage collapsed, I wasn't angry while looking at her, just tired. Victoria sat across from me slowly. I I spent my entire life being afraid. Of your father? Of losing people. You lost me anyway. Tears filled her eyes instantly. I know. I rubbed my face slowly. Do you understand what you did to me? Yes. No, I said quietly. You understand what happened. That's different. Victoria stayed silent. I looked directly at her. When I married you, I trusted you completely. I defended you against everyone. I built my future around us. I loved you, and I loved you enough to believe nothing could destroy us. My voice cracked slightly. Then one night, I found out my entire marriage was standing on secrets. Victoria started crying softly again. I wanted to tell you so many times, but you didn't. I was scared. You always say that. Because it's true. I leaned back heavily. You know what the worst part was? I asked quietly. What? Feeling stupid. Victoria wiped her tears quickly. Ethan, I walked into rooms where people already knew things about my wife that I didn't know myself. Her voice trembled. I never wanted to humiliate you. But you did. She nodded painfully. For a long moment, we simply sat there listening to the storm outside. Then Victoria whispered, I don't expect forgiveness. That's good. I just wanted one honest conversation before everything disappears completely. I studied her face carefully. For the first time since meeting her, she looked emotionally unprotected. No billionaire confidence. No perfect image. Just a broken woman exhausted from carrying years of fear. I met Noah, I finally admitted. Her eyes widened instantly. You did? Yes. Victoria looked terrified suddenly. What did he say? He asked if he ruined everything. She covered her mouth while crying harder. Oh God, he's a good kid. Victoria nodded silently. I wanted to raise him myself, she whispered. Every single day. I believed her. That realization hurt more than anger ever did. Over the next several weeks, Victoria and I started speaking occasionally. Not romantically. Honestly, sometimes we met for coffee. Sometimes we walked silently through parks without discussing the future at all. One afternoon, she asked quietly, Do you hate me? I thought carefully before answering. No. Her eyes filled with relief. But part of me still mourns who I thought you were. She nodded slowly. That's fair. Meanwhile, my own life kept changing. Without the Hayes name attached to me anymore, I rebuilt my architecture company from the ground up. Smaller projects became larger ones. Clients trusted me because of my work instead of my connections. 6 months after leaving the penthouse, I signed a contract for the biggest project of my career. When I told Lily, she nearly screamed. I knew you'd survive this. I laughed. Barely. No, she hugged me tightly. You became stronger. Even Amelia noticed the difference. We met one evening after work while walking through Manhattan together. You finally stopped looking haunted, she said. That obvious? Yes. I smiled slightly. Maybe I got tired of living inside old pain. Amelia looked at me carefully. Good. We stopped near a traffic light while people rushed around us. Then she asked quietly, Do you think you and Victoria will ever get back together? I stared at the city lights ahead. I honestly don't know. And how does that feel? Peaceful, I admitted. Amelia smiled softly. That means you're healing. A few weeks later, Victoria invited me to a quiet diner outside the city. When I arrived, she looked nervous. What's wrong? I asked. She took a deep breath. I need to ask you something. I sat across from her silently. Victoria stared down at her coffee cup. Do you think people like us deserve second chances? I stayed quiet for a moment. Sometimes. She looked up slowly. What about us? The question hung painfully between us. Victoria's voice softened. I'm not asking for the past back. I said nothing. I know we can't erase what happened. You can't. But maybe someday, she hesitated. Maybe we could start over differently. I watched her carefully. No billionaire family. She smiled sadly. No secrets. I remained silent. Just two damaged people trying to heal. Part of me wanted to answer immediately. But healing had taught me something important. Not every wound closes quickly. So instead, I simply said, I don't know yet. Victoria nodded with tears in her eyes. That's still more hope than I expected. Months later, I stood on a quiet beach watching waves crash against the shore while cold wind moved through the air. Noah ran across the sand nearby, laughing while trying to fly a kite badly. Victoria stood beside me quietly. Neither of us spoke much anymore. We didn't need to. After a few minutes, Noah ran toward me smiling. "Ethan, look." The kite finally lifted properly into the sky. I laughed for the first time in what felt like years. And standing there beside the ocean, watching the boy smile, while the woman I once lost stood silently beside me, I finally understood something important. Healing is harder than revenge, but far more powerful.